welcome back. It's the International People and Culture Week 2026, brought to you by, of course, the People and Culture Institute. My name is Jonathan. I'm the manager at the PCI, and I welcome you wherever you're joining us from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is, of course, a global broadcast of the International People and Culture Week. And this year we are doing, of course, the International Regional Caucuses. And today's focus, of course, is on Europe. As you can see, this is a star-studded panel. And of course, we are dying to get into the conversations that they have prepared for us. It's got case studies, examples, ideas, anecdotes. It's got so much going on in today's conversation. So wherever you're joining us from, drop us a line, say hello in LinkedIn. Tell us what you do for a living, where you're joining us from, and how you're making people and culture everybody's business at your workplace. If you're not a member yet at the PCI, you should join us because it's absolutely free. All you got to do is go to www.peopleprofessionals.org and you'll get all the details there. Or you could drop us a line at info@peopleprofessionals.org. And once again, I'll be more than happy to share some more details with you. This is, of course, a fantastic panel, and we are really getting into the details of the people and culture imperative. And today, of course, the focus is on Europe. I want to quickly say hello to all of them. Now, if I start reading out their CVs, we'll have probably 2 hours won't be enough. So I'm going to just quickly say hi and just lay out this global panel for you today, or specifically focused on Europe. Of course, holding things together and convening the conversation is Makisha Nesh, who's, of course, joining us from Brussels in Belgium today. She's the founder, strategic executive advisor, and coach at HR Savant. And she spent, of course, before this, a decade at BSF as a HR business partner and a global talent management leader. So a lot of experience coming into this conversation there, Makisha. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining Makisha on the panel, of course, is Gloria de la Torre, who's originally from Spain, but she's, of course, joining us from Brussels today. And she's a senior executive HR people leader at Ansel. Of course, she brings in over 20 years of experience of HR strategic planning, policy development, and of course, continuous performance improvement. So really interested in getting down into all those details, Gloria. Thank you so much for joining us. Also joining Makisha and Gloria on this panel is Carla de Schepper, of course, joining us from Bruges in Belgium. She's, of course, a group people and culture officer at Animal Care Group over there. With, once again, 15 years of experience, or more than 15 years of experience probably, in the space of employee engagement, well-being, leadership and development, compensation, rewards, and so much more in this space. I'm really very interested in getting down into the details there, Carla. So thank you so much once again for joining us on this regional caucus. Also joining us on the panel is Giorgia Calabria, of course, is originally from Italy, but right now joining us live from the Netherlands. She's the founder of the Human Factor Consulting. Giorgia, of course, has held a lot of roles, especially as a senior talent manager in Prologis, the Royal BMA Group, and of course, Danone in the past, but right now focused very much on the Human Factor Consulting. And we can't wait to get down into all those details, Giorgia. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, joining us on this panel is Jan Allen, of course, the managing director at Yakana Consulting. She's also the member and mentor of the European Women on Boards. And she brings in over 30 years of experience, international experience, driving profitable growth and value creation for international organizations. Jan, thank you so much for joining us on this panel as well. And the key highlight speaker for today, of course, is Mr. David Liddell, of course, is joining us from London in the UK. David, of course, is the president of the PCI, is the founder of the TCM Group, the editor of the People Leader magazine, and author of People and Culture, Transformational Culture, and Managing Conflict, which are all published by Kogan Page and well-reviewed. Without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Makisha, who's going to be leading us in this conversation today. Once again, wherever you're joining us from, drop us a hello on LinkedIn, and let's take this conversation forward. Makisha, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, David. And thank you to my fellow colleagues for joining us today. And to you, all of you out there with us watching today. very excited about this topic. It's International People and Culture Week, and we know culture drives everything that we do and how we work. And so I'm very excited to have all of you here to have this discussion. Today will be interactive. So I will ask the audience as well to ask questions, put in your comments, chat with us as we have this discussion about the imperative around people and culture. So with that, I will let David give us a few words to kick us off, and then we'll have a wonderful conversation about what we're seeing today.
Marcus, thank you so much. It's really lovely to be here for our European caucus, focusing on the people and culture imperative in Europe. And I'm really excited to hear the conversation and hear from colleagues about the amazing work that you're doing to bring people, culture, leadership and learning to life in your organisations. So hi everyone, I'm David. I'm the president of the People and Culture Institute and of the International People and Culture Week. It really gives me enormous honour to be here today talking about people, culture and leadership, my favourite topics, and of course hot topics during this incredible week that we're running from the 1st of May to the 7th of May 2026. My background is in restorative justice and mediation and conflict resolution. I began working through the 90s, and then when I set up my own consultancy, the TCM Group, in 2001, so 25 years ago, was really about providing mediation and restorative justice practices to organisations. But of course, for those of you out there who are mediators and restorative practitioners, you'll know you hear the same stories of trauma and harm, of blame, of distress, of the cost, and just the distress that's caused by so many cultural factors, policies, processes, procedures. So in 2013, I really started to shift the dial and started to think about, okay, how can we deliver some of the upstream changes that would have such a positive impact downstream? And for the last 10, 13 plus years, I've been working with organizations helping to create and shape truly transformational cultures centered around people, around culture, around justice, around fairness, kindness, safety, inclusion, sustainability, but never from a perspective of sort of, although there is an ideological and moral perspective, but also always through the lens of that's how we create high performing organizations and create spaces for people to thrive, teams to flourish, and for organizations to excel. So it's a real pleasure to be here today, Marcus and colleagues, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And Carla, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. So I'm Carla. I'm working as a Group People and Culture Director within Animal Care Group, an international veterinary pharmaceutical business. I've been with the business for 24 years now, so quite a journey. But today we operate across 7 European countries. We've been growing through different acquisitions. And last year, we also did an acquisition in Australia. So as you can imagine, from a people and culture perspective, it has given me exposure to different cultures, different leadership styles, and different levels of organizational maturity. And it also has given me the opportunity to help shape the culture within our business. So really looking forward to today's conversations around people and culture. I will now hand the floor to Gloria.
Thank you, Carla. So thank you, everyone. My name is Gloria de la Torre, and I'm originally from Spain, sitting in Belgium, working since more than 25 years in the HR space. And my roles have been coming from aeronautical and aerospace industries, then to dental and healthcare and protection. And that has been for European organization, then for a Japanese organization, then Australian/American organization. I'm now working as a consultant, supporting different leadership teams. And I had also opportunities to look into more details and research around culture and people, especially for the European Foundation of Quality Management. And there we had the opportunity to learn from the best organizations, the very excellent organizations, and what do they have in common. So I really come from my own very hands-on experience in the different environments, very different industry and countries, but also researching and learning from I would say, a more academic perspective, and on this super important topic we are talking today. So my pleasure being here with all of you. And now I hand over to Giorgia.
Thank you, Gloria. And it's great to be here. So my name is Giorgia Calabria, an Italian living in the Netherlands. And like the rest of the group, I've been working across different countries, different organizations in the last 17 years, always focused on the talent, leadership, and organizational development part. Like Gloria, today I'm also a consultant. I founded the Human Factor Consulting last year, but before I always worked in, let me say, in the corporate environment. And over the past year, my work has really been focused on one key challenge, that is how organizations move from talking about people and culture, because we really talk a lot about people and culture in our organizations, but actually how we move from theory to practice. So how we embedding that into the leadership behaviors and daily decisions. So because I see consistently that the intentions are good, but when it's about execution, we could do better there. So this is really, let me say, the lens that I will bring into this conversation today, and more than happy to be with all of you. And I will hand over to Jan.
Hello. So I'm, thank you very much for that. I'm Jan Allen, and I'm very happy to be here with this audience because I love working in multicultural environments. I've been doing it for over 25 years now. You hear I'm American, but I live in Belgium for 29 years, and I have been leading EMEA and global sales organizations here for both American and European headquartered technology companies during that time. And it's never a dull moment, navigating all the different cultural dynamics that you face in this region with over 200 countries alone in EMEA, plus bridging continents together. So I've been doing a lot of creating and scaling organizations for these companies over the years. And that requires leading people through change, and often very rapid change and a lot of change. So, culture is a huge factor when you're doing these things in these environments. I have learned a lot, and I have earned the title sometimes of United Nations Peacekeeper doing these things. But what's clear is that culture is so critical for success of these programs. And I think that's very often underestimated because people make great strategic business plans, but when it comes down to execution, it's still people. And you need to keep the people at the heart of everything you do if you want to make it successful. So anyway, that's so I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much for including me, Marquisa and David. And I need to hand over to somebody now.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll take it.
Maybe Marquisa. Well, sorry.
No, it's okay. So a little bit about myself. Jonathan introduced me as well, but Marquisa Nash. I am the founder and strategic executive advisor and coach at the HR Savant. Also 20 plus years in HR leadership in large Fortune, I would say 100 companies, primarily in the US, but I've been working abroad the past 4 years in wonderful Brussels. So working internationally, globally, leading through multiple industries, aerospace, chemicals, automotive. So at the essence of what I do and what we all do is really centered around people. And as Jan mentioned, with all the strategy in the world, all the wonderful plans, it's really that people that really drive and bring to life organizations, whether you're profit, nonprofit, independent. We all need this ecosystem to make our organizations and really the world a better place. And right now, I think you definitely need better leaders in a multitude of ways. And so where this conversation will go, we'll talk about a little bit about the 5 domains of David's model, which include people, culture, strategy, justice, and value. and how that's really showing up today in today's organization. And so we'll have a conversation through that. We'll talk a little bit about how do we deal with resilience in our organizations. Really, how do we lead through complexity? And then our final thoughts. So once again, please join us on your thoughts. There's a lot going on. We really want to hear from you. And so with that, what I wanted to do, and I wanted to ask the group, you know, we see a lot of what's happening in the world, and we hear the 5 elements of what David has in his model, and recent research from Deloitte and the Center of Creative Leadership have given us some additional inputs around, you know, 59% of organizations are taking a tech-focused approach to AI, which we'll talk about today. Yet those taking a human-centric approach are 1.6 times more likely to exceed their expectations on investment returns. We see that also 66% of C-suite leaders agree it's very or extremely important to push beyond the boundaries of traditional organizational functions, yet only 7% are making great progress in doing so. And so we see that organizations are investing a lot in leadership development and people-centered culture, yet there seems to be a gap maybe in how that's actually translating. So one question for reflection is, what are you seeing in organizations today when it comes to embedding people in culture imperative? You know, where is it working? Where are the gaps? As we say here, culture is everyone's business, so we make it our business. So I will open the floor up for anyone that your initial thoughts on that question. I'll start with Gloria. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Makisa. Well, it's a very relevant topic. I think that a little bit similar to what we were already saying before. I think it is clearly gaining visibility. It is more often into the conversations, and I think that most of the organizations recognize the relevance, the importance. However, I still believe that there is a gap between the good intention and the execution. And I think that the analysis should come from the perspective of what is preventing organizations to actually come from those good intentions and good ideas sometimes to the execution. It is for sure pressure, it is many other things, but yeah, I think that we see it's not fully embedded into how decisions are done on a daily business. And that's where I think the business case needs to be created, and we should gain stronger push from that perspective. I don't know how you see it. Okay, it's great.
I totally agree with you, Gloria, because I think this is also something that I was mentioning before. I think the gap between, you know, the good intentions and the reality is huge, because what we have seen is, let me say, when things are getting a bit more complex, leaders say always, yes, we want to talk about culture, but then under pressure, they will always prioritize, you know, the short-term results. We talk about let's build a feedback culture, and then we are still avoiding the difficult conversations. I think if we look at all our organizations today, the awareness is there, because there are leaders that genuine, they see the adding value that we see in people, in leadership development, but is the execution part that is lacking. And I think is where we should be able, let me say, to drive the conversations in a different way. And as I mentioned also in my introduction, maybe the real question is not do we believe or not in people and culture, but are we constantly acting on that? So in our daily decisions as leader interactions, are we really walking the talk? I think this is what I've been, let me say, noticing in different organizations.
I love that. I can't just come in. I think I really want to reinforce that point. It's such an important point. And one of the examples I can give, well, from my own experience of organizations wanting to all that talk, is the development of coaching systems within organizations. I come from a background of mediation and alternative dispute resolution, which is very much about empowering people to resolve their differences. But it always come in very late at the end of the day. It was very much a sticking plaster approach, became quite transactional. So I've become a massive fan of coaching as an empowerment tool within organizations and developing coaching systems. And so work with a wide array of really exciting organizations. But every time I'm in a room with leaders and they start to really truly understand what coaching means, you can see the breaks sometimes and the resistance comes on. Because are we truly ready to create cultures around empowerment that are enabling, that we're distributing power to others? And coaching to me feels like a really powerful way of helping Georgia to the point, and the points that have been made so beautifully, is walking the talk and developing those coaching capabilities. But it's interesting when we see that resistance, but also you get these wonderful moments when people really immerse themselves into those coaching conversations, giving feedback, receiving feedback, deep insight, deep understanding, the development of rapport and empathy and a sense of connection. You get this wonderful sound of, now we can start to do some work to drive performance, to manage that change, to deal with that acquisition. And so those skills, but there's still a lot of resistance out there to truly empowering and enabling others. And I think coaching is just one example that can show up in terms of how organizations are addressing that.
I was just going to make a comment about that to say I agree. And I think I heard someone say when it comes down to the short-term results, then people tend to default to not prioritize the culture. And I think that is, I see that time and again. And I think that's very largely driven by this whole quarterly earnings world that we live in, the short-termism. And I don't think it's good for business. I think we need to take a longer-term view on these things, because people will default to just quick and dirty and let's get it done. And they don't prioritize the mental health and the empathy for the people and all these kinds of things, and that's where the rubber hits the road, if you will, So I think it has a lot to do with the corporate objectives. And I think people are very heavily driven on these quarterly objectives. There need to be, for leaders, some more long-term objectives in there. I don't know. I mean, you all are from the HR, more of an HR background, and how you would achieve that. But it would help, because what I see mostly in the sales world is if it's not in an objective, people don't pay attention to it. It's all peripheral noise. They're just kind of like focused on that.
Yeah, Jen, I fully agree with this. In our business also this year, we really started to focus on the how instead of just the what of delivering results. So what we did was also linking our winning leader behaviors and our core values to the individual objective setting. So everyone in our business is a leader, even if you're an individual contributor. You also need to take ownership in your role and lead through the winning leader behaviors that we expect from our leaders. So we are really shifting towards focusing more on the how results are being delivered. And that also helps shape our culture. And what we also did in our business, and where I saw also a shift in mindset, was even changing the function, the name of the function HR, to people and culture, because I feel this much more reflects the culture we want to drive within Animal Care Group. And another thing I want to add to this is when it comes to empowering our leaders in our business. So often leaders speak about accountability, but we are moving away from accountability. We are speaking about taking ownership, because taking ownership is something which comes from within. So we are speaking about taking ownership as an individual contributor, but as a people leader, you are empowering others to take ownership. And that's very strong within our business now, something we are focusing on.
And if I may, Carla, you have just touched also another key element, that we tend to focus on the what and how, but I think we should also pause and start with the why. because I think is where also we can play a critical role when we talk about culture. Because the what and how is always pretty clear, but how you are going to engage your people if you don't have a clear why? Because then is where people are looking at leaders to say, okay, but why are we doing that? And that part is we are underestimating the power of sharing the why we are doing things.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah,
building a sense of common purpose, and that because when you have a common purpose, and the purpose for me as an individual contributor and within my team is then aligned to the organization's purpose, the strategy, the vision, the mission, the strategic objectives, that becomes almost this unstoppable force, that sense of common purpose. But it has to start with the why. Let's explain what's the rationale, what's the why, and then connect that purpose. I love that. I think it's such a powerful reminder of some of those key messages. Thank you.
It is, and I think with all your wonderful insight, it's really about how do we prepare our leaders to be able to have those difficult conversations, to teach them how to coach, not for a check the box exercise, but really as a way of working. I learned this early in my career. And so therefore, when it's how you work, I think you're able to articulate the why, and you're able to connect with people to address topics as they come up. And as we move through this conversation, part of today's conversation is also the volatility in the world. And organizations, people, everyone is being tested in ways that seem to get more intense over the years. We've had a lot of disruption. We continue to have volatility. And so one question when we talk about how do we prepare ourselves and how do we become more resistant is, how can organizational culture help build resilience in light of global volatility? So what are your thoughts? What are you seeing right now? And maybe what's some practical tips or suggestions you could help give to our audience? I'll start with Jan. Yeah.
I was going to say, I was going to jump into, in terms of, you're saying now enabling the people, the new managers, right, to lead. And I see this a lot. I'm working the last 10 years with people that are young in career. So either their first or second job out of university. And then, we do a lot of work on career pathing and very often when these people make manager, they don't know, they haven't had any training on this. So luckily, I have had over the years very good enablement people that I've worked with alongside HR to develop people development programs. And we've had people that are interested in management kind of come forward, and we put them through these voluntary training programs, let's say, on teaching them the basics of management, people leadership. Empathy is always a key thing, the listening. So we are investing a lot in the companies that I've worked with over the last 10 years in doing this kind of thing early in career to try to help people. But, we have an influx of people also that come in more experienced. They haven't had the benefit of that. So we try to then create I'm basically creating a lot of programs in my organizations to cover these things, because I see how critical it is. Because when I heard you say, like, well, when you have to have challenging conversations, a lot of people don't know how to do that, and they avoid them until it becomes a train wreck. And then, you have to get HR to step in, and it's kind of, so anyway, a lot of proactive training, I would say, in enablement, so that you make people ready for those situations.
And if I can add something, is that I think it's pretty easy to talk about culture when things are going pretty well. And then when, let me say, things are not working, then you see, let me say, the real nature of us, all of us as human beings. So I think since COVID, we have understood that uncertainty is part of our DNA nowadays. It's not something, and is evolving. So every day, every week, there is something that is changing our plan. And we should look at that from the two different perspectives, the professional one and the personal life. because this has a huge also an impact how personally you deal with uncertainty. This will reflect on how you act as a leader. And I've seen that in all the leadership programs that I've been involved with, that when we talk about clarity, creating ownership and accountability and consistency, then you see that leaders are changing their mindset, because also the vulnerability part, I think Jan was mentioning empathy, but also the vulnerability, be able to take decisions without knowing all the answers and not even knowing if this is the right strategy. But also, again, explaining the why, communicate proactively so that people can understand why we are moving into that direction, even if it's not maybe the perfect one, but let's explore taking actions.
I want to add there what we also saw.
I would agree. Oh, Carla's talking. Okay. Sorry, I can hear you, Carla.
No, just wanted to say, to support our business as to being resilient. What we also did, as David mentioned, was really implementing a bit of a coaching culture in our business. So where we then saw a shift from our leaders telling things to really unlocking potential. And in an environment, in today's environment where change is constant, it really helps. It helps with transformation. It helps people to take ownership. It helps with change. So this is really something that works very well. And so our leaders are being trained on coaching skills. And what we would do then is really to organize some peer-to-peer learning where they will share best practices as to coaching, where they have been coaching in some situations of change and what has worked really well. And that's something we see as really positive in our business.
I agree, Carla, if I may add to that. And I think that we are all mentioning different elements that many of them remind me to this PERMA model that Martin Seligman was actually creating to help develop resilience in organizations. And it comes from the positive psychology, as we all know, Martin Seligman. And this PERMA model goes first. The P is for positive emotions. And you really need to actually work on consciously working on developing these skills to actually help with these positive emotions to cope with the, I would say, not so positive or even negative emotions sometimes, right? Then you have the engagement, which is essential to cope with, I would say, the difficult moments, the crises, the emergencies, and all these situations we are all living in every organization, improving the relationships. How do we, and this now relates to what you were saying before, David, regarding coaching teams, coaching systems in a way that they are all collectively working together. And then last but not least, the meaning, everything related to purpose, clarity on the purpose. And I remember a very specific action, not even an intervention. It was alive since ever in this Japanese organization I was working at, GC Europe. They ask every single person in the organization to have in a written format, what is my vision? To always be connected to my vision. And how do you connect your vision, your individual vision, with this organization vision? What is this? All these elements are, in a way, they are enabling all the capacity of organizations all together, being more resilient and going and navigating through all the hardest time. That they are actually right here, but they will be changing and there will be way more to come, right? So it's important to be consciously working on those elements. That's what I'm saying.
Gloria, if I could come in there as well, I think it's so powerful and working within the system. The challenge I've experienced within the system is much like a human system. We kind of either have the stress response, or going back to the positive psychology, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphin, those happier hormones. But within the system that we create within our workplace, I'm going to think about the sort of one of the domains in my people and culture operating model, the justice domain. we deliver justice in our organizations often through a punitive sanction, blame, adversarial system of justice, and that strikes fear, and fear is almost the opposite of resilient. I can't be resilient if I feel fear, and that fear can lead to harm and lead to trauma, which again further undermines our resilience. And you talked earlier, Jan, about the kind of the train crash and then going to HR to get resolution. But actually what often happens is, because we avoid having those conversations, in my experience and talking with so many managers, there's this culture of extensive inaction or expensive overreaction. And what we really need in the middle is some form of action. But when we have a system which is predicated on a justice paradigm, which is retributive, punitive, and sanctions-based, that in and of itself engenders fear. I'm going to go to HR is a threat. I'll bring out a grievance is a threat. I'll speak to my manager is a threat. And all of those threats and aggregating perpetuate fear and undermine the resilience. And one of the ways I would work with organizations, big organizations through to smaller organizations, is rewiring the way that we think about justice in our organizations. We can be compassionate and compliant. We can be empathetic and hold people to account. We can be tough and we can be tender. And I think what I find in the people and culture imperative, and shifting towards the people and culture focus, to build strong, resilient and high performing workplaces, because that's what a resilient workplace is about. It's about high performance. It's about people and culture professionals holding multiple truths and not relying on binary, oppositional, reductive, often corrosive and adversarial systems of justice, because that tears us apart. And look, we just have to look at our world and see the world being torn apart because of hegemony, the autocracy, the blame, the command, the power, the abuse of power that exists. And if we model that in our workplaces, and so many systems do have that model within workplaces, the net result is an unhappy, unhealthy, unharmonious and unperforming workplace. And that's what I love about the people and culture imperative. It shifts that and helps to shift that dial towards a happier, healthier, more harmonious, high performing workplace, driven through a level of resilience, and removing cortisol and adrenaline as the primary hormones that run through the system of our workplaces.
I would say so, David. And I would also add that one of the things I see from around the world is that, and it varies from organization to organization, and for me, it comes down to accountability and what and how you are intentional about how you work. And, you know, we understand business in all its forms, but as an individual and as a leader, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And how you treat people in conjunction with all the things you need to achieve, you need empathy. You need to have a level of transparency, but you also have to hold yourself accountable for the decisions that you make and for what you're asking people to do, right? Because we know with all the great strategy, you cannot get it done without people. And people know when you're being honest with them. They know when you're manipulating them. They know all of these things. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the day-to-day. And in order to help our organizations evolve, I think we have to get back to the human essence of just dealing with people on a very practical level. And I think people sense that. And although they may not like the outcome, right, because we're not talking about perfection, they will understand and they will probably respect what you're doing as opposed to leading in a disingenuous manner. And, you know, I think this is something that tends to get lost in the heat of achieving all the KPIs and rolling out the new product and whatever we get distracted with throughout the day-to-day through the course of let's just say business, right? Business as usual, on top of all the other maybe macro, you know, events that put pressure on what we need to get done as well. So insightful.
The KPIs become CPIs, Markissa, from key performance indicators to cultural performance indicators. And maybe the OKRs become objectives and cultural results, maybe by placing culture at the very center of the way that we think about structuring the outputs that we achieve, might help us then to consider culture as the primary focus for us all to be focusing on and concerned about.
Yeah.
It's a good point. I mean, I was just thinking, Marquise, as I'm listening to you talking about that, I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet lately about the very big drop in psychological safety in the workplace. And what you're talking about now with this accountability, I mean, it ties right into that. And what people, you know, then we had the thing going on for a while where people say they were, silent quitting or quiet quitting, something like this. But there was an overwhelming drop in psychological safety and in the workplace, and it does impact productivity. I mean, there's no way around it, because at the end of the day, businesses are people, and that's how you get things done. And so it is amazing to me, the fact that David, that they're not putting this at the center. You know, I think there's much more dialogue and training and development needed around this topic to understand that if you get this right and you create psychologically safe environments, which means you can have challenging conversations in a constructive way that allow people to leave that conversation feeling good about it and that they can grow from it. You know, it's a win-win-win. So anyway, it kind of ties all together. So I just wanted to add that.
I mean, that goes to the sort of, again, one of the domains in the model is about the value domain. And I think one of the challenges, I'd be really keen to hear people's thoughts on this, is how do we demonstrate the value of that win-win-win? Because it's pretty compelling. You'd have thought it's pretty compelling. You'd have thought the arguments would make themselves abundantly clear, but it feels like there's so much resistance in organizations to adopting some of these more progressive people, culture, leadership, and learning routes. So one of the questions I might have there is, how do we demonstrate the value of that win-win-win? Because I'm sold, Jan. How do we persuade people to come with us, I think, is what I'm getting at.
Maybe it goes back to the objectives again. You know, Carla was talking about building in some of those objectives around how. I really believe this is a key element, especially in executive, middle management, and you know, compensation. I think it has to be measured. So, Carla, I don't know if you maybe have a comment on that. But
yeah, I think so. It's and it's also about openness in your business. What we are also doing now at senior level, in order to build a level also of resilience in the business, is, for example, at start of the meetings, we would also ask people to score themselves from 0 to 10, and they cannot use a 7, and they need to score themselves on a business level, a well-being level, and a private level. And by doing this, even at a senior level, we show also as leaders that we are vulnerable. And this then cascades down to the lower teams into the organization. And that's something that really works well within our business.
Love that.
I don't think that we have the secret recipe yet, because I think this is also, if we look about, resilience, this has been also one of the, let me say, buzzwords that we have been using and reusing a lot in the last years. What I've seen that sometimes is working is doing a bit less and doing that in a really open way. So with clear communication, clear expectations, and always those check-in moments to keep that engagement, because let's also not forget that resilience is also strongly correlated to the change journey. And you also need to consider the change curve, the different emotions, and how those emotions are impacting the level of the resistance of one person. And also, I've seen that is working pretty well when you equip leaders with some tools. That the level of resilience that you have is not the same that your team members will show up. So everyone has a different state and level, and as a leader you just need to invest time on your people and understand what they need from you, because everyone will need something different. And what perhaps doesn't help is that we are just running. Our leaders, they are always busy. They're always, cutting short their one-on-one sessions because they don't have time. And the paradigm should really completely change, that investing 1 hour with a team member has a huge return of investment on the long term. But we don't talk too much about long-term investments. It's all about short term. Let's run. Next sprint. And then in the end, it's a marathon that is not sustainable.
And that's also, I think, where the sharing of best
Georgia, and as I reflect upon it, I mean, whenever I lead teams, this is my first priority. And I tell my team this, my one-on-ones, I don't cancel. I mean, we may move them, but that is their time. It's dedicated. We have conversations about the business and how they're doing. But this is fundamental to how I work. Because that relationship is so important. And then I think it helps to have deeper and different discussions because it also builds trust. Because it's not about, once again, it's not about being perfect. It's, it's not about having the answers all the time. But people have to genuinely feel that you care about them as an individual. And, I learned this early in my career. If you take care of your people, let's say, they will take care of you. And this has ring true over 20 plus years of working with people. If they fundamentally care that you are doing your best for them as well as the organization, I think people respect it. So I don't know what anyone else's thoughts are.
I think we'll jump over to Carla. I know you're having a few problems with the sound there, Marcus.
Okay, yeah.
And Carla was there. So we're just going to jump back to Carla there as well. Some fantastic points. I'd love to explore those. Carla, over to yourself. And what I'll do, Marcus, I'll let you know when Carla's finished making her point. I know there's just one or two little gremlins in our StreamYard system here today. Carla, over to you.
Yeah, no, I agree with Marquise. I think it also comes to the role modeling of our leaders, and that's also where the coaching then comes in. Because, if people coach and listen to understand, people feel also valued and listened to, and this also helps them with the trust piece in the business. And I think to really embed in our business, the winning leader behaviors. What we are also doing is creating some focus groups where we have leaders from different countries sharing best practice as how these winning leader behaviors have really helped them deliver results.
I love that. I mean, one of the things I hear, the best leadership I hear, there's four lines or four statements that the leaders make in a very authentic and genuine way. I see you because no one wants to feel invisible. I hear you because everyone wants to feel heard. I understand you because we have a deep desire to be understood. I appreciate you because we have a deep desire to feel that we're delivering value. And so when the leader takes the time, I think it's such an important point about taking the time. If we don't take the time to have the conversations where people feel seen and heard, valued and appreciated, there's a slow and inexorable decline in their morale, their performance, and their productivity. And that's on the leader, because the leader has a fiduciary responsibility to drive shareholder value and wealth and value for the organization. So it's not a being human-centered and driving a people-first agenda in the workplace isn't because we're all nice and we want to do the nice thing. It's because that underpins effective, long-term, sustainable, really resilient businesses where people are coming with us. And ultimately that can show up on the balance sheet, because if we all feel seen and heard and valued and understood, and that's not just me in some rose-tinted glasses, but where we make that investment and listen and engage and seek to understand, and we give our people a jolly good listening to and really hear them, then we see discretionary effort. And imagine in a 10,000 headcount organization dispersed across Europe, if everyone put in 10% extra discretionary effort, the impact on the balance sheet would be, and the profit and loss would be significant. And that would then drive long-term change, which I think has been one of the factors, Marcus, from this conversation about we've become very short-termist in the way we plan. And maybe that was COVID, I don't know. Maybe that was one of the outcomes of COVID as we stopped planning ahead and has anyone got a 2030 strategy, or are we all still working on our 26, 27 strategy, or even still, are we still working on our 25, 26 strategy? Maybe that's part of the problem, I don't know. But I see you, I hear you, I understand you, I appreciate you. Has to be one of the core messages of the authentic, truly transformational leader, I think.
I wanted to just comment on that, David, because a couple of things you said, because for me, COVID, there were a couple of things that came out of this, is that we lost the in-person connection with people, you know, and everything became on Zoom. And actually, I have to say personally, I was so used to doing both, you know, that in the beginning, I underestimated the impact that it was going to have. But trust declined because, you know, we don't see people in the eyes anymore as much, you know, on these Zoom relationships. And then the other thing that we're talking about listening to people, really listening, you know, there is a saying about you have to first listen to understand and then seek to be understood. And I find this to be a huge issue in working in these multicultural workplaces, because people are coming at things very often from their own viewpoint, you know, their own filters, their own cultural filters, and not understanding that when you're speaking to someone of another culture, you know, they're coming from a different place. And so you can't apply your same mindset to that. You have to really develop this cross-cultural awareness. And it's not something that is, I would say, straightforward for everyone. And I don't think that it is trained enough in the workplace, honestly. And this leads to huge issues in the workplace, you know, misunderstandings and people assuming bad intentions where it's, you know, it's not there. So
I fully agree, Jan. And actually, adding to what you're saying, and if we are talking now and focusing on Europe, we have an extra layer of complexity here, which is all the languages that we speak in Europe, right? So the language is a door that helps and open the communication. And communication seems to be all the time part of the solution of so many problems. But here, it really is. There's no way out. And it's all about listening and talking to each other and understanding each other, to work together, to increase the trust, to go in the same direction. There's no other way. And especially careful or consciously thinking about the differences when we work in these very international environments, things can be very easily understood. We are not native speakers, so we need to be careful. We need to try to ask for feedback. Am I understanding this? You know, this type of moments are crucial, and dedicating the right time for that is essential. And everything against that is just increasing the problems. So hopefully, and especially in these very international environments, and I don't even know how many languages do we speak here in Europe, but it is part of this big complexity that, well, there is many other complexities because of the different legislations, etc. But only with the language and only within the topic of let's communicate, let's be clear, let's be already there. You have a very important topic here in Europe.
I think that's a really good point, just to quickly say, when you just mentioned that, you know, people, the business language predominantly is English. And so for the non-native speakers, this introduces an extra layer of complexity into this whole mix of like being understood, because sometimes they, you know, they don't have the right word. Or I just watched something on cultural differences with Asia that they, you know, they really pause. They don't get the time to speak very often. So you have to be very intentional as a leader to call people out, you know, in the meetings and here, so you can get all the diversity of thought in the room. So good point.
Thank you. And, you know, this could feel like, and, you know, it's an intense discussion. It seems like a very heavy topic. But there is a positive side, I would say, to people and culture and the imperative in this volatile world. And, you know, there are leaders that are getting it right, let's just say. So is there one insight that you have, that you've seen, or a leader that you've seen doing this, let's say, in a positive way? Do you have any examples that you've seen that you could highlight for the audience to maybe as they're probably saying, yes, I see myself. I'm experiencing all of these things. But could you share maybe some of the good things that you've seen in regards to what leaders are doing, I would say, in a positive way?
If I could jump in, Mark,
Sure.
Marcus, sorry, Gloria, were you going to? I'm happy
Go
to.
ahead, please, David.
Thank you. Well, I'll be fair. I think so. So the People Leader magazine, which is one of the publications which is supporting International People and Culture Week, we feature every month chief people officers, chief executive officers, who are, to your point, Marcus, are demonstrating those fantastic connections with each other, with the organisation, and delivering a really powerful people and culture imperative. And Joyce Idinaboye, who is the chief people officer at Oxfam, was on the front cover of our recent edition, and she was really speaking about the work that she's been doing to build a really powerful culture within Oxfam. And what I really enjoyed in that edition as well was a piece that looked at the relationship between the chief people officer and the chief executive officer. And so my observation is that when the CPO and the CEO build a bond, a connection, and the chief executive officer sees the relationship with the chief people officer as one of the, if not the most important strategic connections within the organization, what we see is an intersection between the people plan and the people strategy and the corporate strategy. And to that point we've been making around leadership and resilience and challenge, when we see that driven at a strategic level, at a board level and an executive level, where the people strategy and the corporate strategy become aligned and become one, coalesce, driven by a strong CPO-CEO relationship, where there's a really powerful interconnection between those two, then we start to see that cascading down through the organization. We start to see the introduction of digital transformation and AI no longer as a technical priority, but now as a people priority. We start to see a shift in the way that we think about HR, from transactional, compliance-driven HR, grievance, discipline, performance, all of those legacy systems, which thankfully organizations are now rejecting and moving away from, to a more transformational, people-led HR systems and processes. And we start to see learning and development processes which are designed to support the people, culture, leadership, and learning imperative within our organizations. The skills we've been talking about, coaching, positive psychology, appreciative inquiry, principled negotiation, become the core skills within the learning and development portfolio. But the best stories, I interviewed John Slade, the chief executive of the Financial Times, for my book, and at the launch of my book at Mishcon in London. And again, he spoke of the powerful work that they're doing within the Financial Times globally to bring together all of the key players from the organization to support the development of a purpose-driven, values-based and people-centered organization. So I just want to reinforce your point, Marcus, that there are some great stories and experiences out there. And again, I'll make a little plug for the People Leader magazine. If you want to read some of those, do subscribe to the People Leader at People Leader. There you go. It's appeared like magic on the screen, Marcus. But that's yeah, that chief people officer CEO relationship to me is, get that bit right, a lot then follows from that. You're just on mute.
Yes.
Sorry. I was just pausing to see what else are you seeing that's positive in your current environment, and maybe some of the great things that leaders are doing or that you've done, because we're all leaders. So
I mean, I can jump in and just say, I mean, I've worked in a lot of transformation programs over the years, and you know, it's high change and environments. And some of the things I've seen people do the best is when they when you come in and you need to make big changes, everyone is very nervous, I would say, is to get everyone in a room and just start by building trust with people, you know. And as I mentioned before, specifically calling on people who are quiet in the room to speak up. You know, those kinds of practices, I think, go a long way, because then people see that you actually are taking the time, that you do care, that you're listening. You know, so first get everyone, you know, let people feel heard, and then actually take some actions on some of the things that people said, so they see that, oh, you actually don't just say it, you walk the talk. So I think, you know, building trust early by tapping into people in the beginning is a good way to start programs and things.
from my side, when I think about a good example, I'm always thinking about a senior director that I met once. We were working together and he was doing a transformation, and he was redundant. And no one in his team knew that. He was the only one. It was me and him. And we knew that after 6 months, he was leaving the organization because no other opportunities inside. And that person was there every day for his team, investing a lot on, bringing clarity, even if, for him it was painful to talk about this transformation. His change curve was really a mess at the beginning, but he was there. And he was there until the very last day with a big smile, this positive attitude, that when he disclosed that he was leaving the company because he was redundant, people were shocked because they were not expecting that, looking at his posture, tone, commitment. So I think just following also our own values when we act as a leader is a plus, because we can always have a tough moment, but just stay close to our values and work the talk, like I mentioned before, I think is must have for all our leaders.
Love that, Georgia. And I think I've seen that not very often, but I've seen it. And also looking at what else I've seen lately that was quite impressive, I've seen leaders which were completely, absolutely overwhelmed with many things, and still they were able to find the time in the middle of those crazy agendas to talk about this, to actually find in their strategic meetings, etc., few hours or even days to pause and just create that space to protect the time so the teams could come to talk together. And that time was so appreciated by the team members, because it's actually the fastest things go, slower you need to sometimes think and discuss strategically. And that was so appreciated. And I recall recently, they were all, before I can facilitate those workshops, I tend to have individual discussions with all of them. And they were all super stressed. However, they were super happy to come and dedicate one full day just to be together as a team, to talk about how busy they are. Let's align, let's listen to each other. For sure, increasing the trust is essential as a team to actually later on, I'm talking the classical Lencioni model, but to then be able to hold accountability, right? So that was essential. And it is the leader who decides, let's protect this time to do this. It is their prerogative, and they find the time, they find the money, they find the way to make it happen. So yes, indeed, there are really good leaders in that.
Where I have seen successful leadership is where there was the right balance between challenge and support, because often in leadership, you see either the side of challenging and not enough support, or very supportive and they don't dare to challenge. So I think if leaders can find the right balance between challenge and support, so that they also have the skills then to have difficult conversations when things are not going as expected, where they can ensure that there's an environment of trust. I think that's where really the people are getting developed, that we can speak about people developers.
I think that's a very good point about the balance, between the support and the challenge, because that's a very, I would say, it's not something that first time managers, it's difficult to learn that, right? And it has a lot to do with being intuitive with other people and sensing, how much challenge this person can handle. I also think you have to be appropriately challenging to people, because some people will just crumble under it, right? And basically, but other people thrive on it, and so you have to kind of understand the people better, very well, before you apply the wrong formula there. So it's very independent, tailored to people.
Yeah. I think so. I think one of the things I've noticed in organizations is the speed by which we evaluate others, blame each other, judge each other, other each other. And then that creates these big gaps and dissonance within our organizations, and nature abhors a vacuum, and into that vacuum seeps mistrust, underperformance, unhappiness, low morale, absence. People talked about presenteeism and the great resignation. I think the challenge is, as we're moving away from that kind of judgment blame system, because it's failed and it's never worked, it doesn't work, it will never work, and the ability to engage with each other in those conversations is to recognize the person is not the problem is the problem. And if we want to really build strong, resilient relationships and organizations, we have to stop tutting at each other and pointing the finger at each other and blaming each other, and recognize actually real change as a leader starts always here with me. And sometimes that's about recognizing that I need to change. So when I do performance management training for managers, I often say to the manager, the most important question you can ask in a performance conversation isn't how well are you performing as an employee, it's how well am I performing as a manager. The ability to receive feedback, to respond non-defensively to criticism, to give feedback which protects the self-esteem of others and maintains a positive, healthy relationship. That creates, Jan, the win-win-win and win-win-win situation. If we focus on that and give our managers the skills, it's sometimes lamentable how little training and development is given to managers to give them the skills to do that. Yet when it goes wrong, we crush them and we crush the people involved, and the cost to our organizations is so huge. And then we wring our hands and say, why did it all go wrong? Well, it all went wrong because we didn't invest in the fundamental skills and tools that leaders need in our organizations to have the conversations that they need to be able to shape a positive culture. And one of the points that was made earlier is about behavior and mindset. I think of this as Mabel: mindset, attitude, behavior, and language. And that creates the culture. So if we want to go and create a positive culture, go and ask Mabel. Mindset, attitude, behavior, and language. And that, when they align, they create the most powerful cultures. But we've got to invest in leaders and managers to get this stuff right. But when we do, wow, it's incredible. It's incredible. I think we're coming towards the end of the session today, Marcus. So what an amazing conversation. Back to you, Marcus.
Thank you. And I as we have had this discussion today, I think one of the things that I just thought about too is that I very rarely hear the language of win-win-win, right? It's win-lose, win at all costs. And I think which seems so simple, if we had the collective mindset of win-win-win, what the different type of environment we could create, right, in our respective organizations and the relationships that we have within them and across the complex organizations, and even living in such a diverse part of the world, as such as being in Europe, right, has its own layer of complexity. Even when we were talking about dealing with the different works councils, right, it's often viewed as an obstacle, but once again, it has its place. But that even goes back to the relationship that you have even with them. So within our organizations, outside our organizations, it's all around the same type of mindset and intentionality and intention. And so as we bring this wonderful conversation to a close, and thank you so much to the guests, I would like to get your kind of thought as we close the session out. What is one thing leaders must prioritize right now? As we close this session, what comes to mind? What are you seeing, and what do you think would be most beneficial? So I don't know who'd like to go first.
I think
Go ahead, Jen.
I think basically building trust. I mean, I think, as I was saying before, because the trust factor, it all stems from there. People-centric organizations are built on having that dialogue, the transparency, having people feel the psychological safety to speak up and give you that feedback. Otherwise, you can never enact on meaningful change. So, but it all starts with trust, So I think that would be, and it revolves around all the things we're talking about with, enabling people, giving them the tools and the training for this, creating the right environment for this. So, that would be my one thing.
I fully agree with the strengthening trust through transparency and fairness. But I also think it's also important to build leadership capability at every level by focusing on the coaching skills, leading change in our day-to-day environment where change is constant. I think that's also important.
I'll jump in on the back of that's okay. And I think because there's such an important point around the capabilities and trust. I think my advice to leaders is you're not passive bystanders on culture or people and culture. You're active contributors, and we can shift culture one conversation at a time. And leaders I always get worried about sort of parking culture at the door of the leaders and then bashing them when they get it wrong. And I do worry about boss bashing, and I'll focus on leadership, but so much of it does start and end with leadership. We can't deny that or ignore it. So my message to leaders is think about the choices you take and the decisions you make. Do you put yourself in another person's shoes? Do you consider the impact on other human beings? Do you engender a sort of focus on a people first approach, or is it about risk compliance, more transactional, reactive decision making? Because those are rabbit holes that will take you down a culture which is defined by those behaviors. So be intentional, as people have said, be deliberate, and think about putting yourself in another person's shoes when you're making those decisions. I've never seen a single business decision that was made, was impacted in an adverse way, where the people making the decision used empathy as part of the decision-making process. So using empathy in strategic decision-making at least will have a neutral impact, but the likelihood is it will be a better decision because you consider the impact of your decision on another human being or group of human beings. So empathy is a strategic decision-making tool to leverage effective business growth, scale, and profitability. And I think when we start to see it in those terms, suddenly the lights begin to come on for our leaders, I think. But those are my thoughts. One culture change, one conversation at a time. Let's make them great conversations.
I think maybe I'm not going to repeat the same things that the group was sharing. For me, maybe this is a provocative one. So stop adding new initiatives and start really focusing on leadership consistency. Because I strongly believe that culture does not change through our models, initiative programs, but is really when we look at how leaders consistently behave in conversations, in feedback, in decision. So I think this is what they should do a bit more often. So be consistent and support the, like you mentioned, David, the culture in a proactive way. Be part of the process, of the journey.
I agree with everything said so far. So if I need to add something else, it would be two things. One is in line with the cultural change that you were mentioning, David. I've seen how organizations invest so much time, effort, and budget in talking about their values and how we're going to make our culture revise and all the marketing around and branding the culture. However, do more, say less. The culture is not built by whatever you show in your website. It's actually built on, and people get what you do and what you don't do. Those are the messages. What you tolerate, what you don't tolerate. And that's the essence of the culture. So do more, say less. And the second one is, and this is also a little bit a provocative thing for all the audience listening to us, and they might be also leaders, and they all read these reports, Deloitte, CCL, many others. We see the data. There is intention. Still, there is this gap between intention and execution. What is preventing you to go from what you really know it's going to work to what you actually do every day. What is preventing these leaders to actually do what they know it is the right thing, the right decision? What are those choices that they have to make every day when they finally decide not to prioritize, not to make the time, not to communicate, etc., etc.? So what is preventing them? I would say that's the key. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely conversation. Very, very interesting.
Thank you so much. And I think that is the perfect way to bring this to a close. I love a good, provocative, thought-provoking question, right? Because we all have a responsibility. And so thank you, Carla and Gloria and Georgia and Jan and David and Jonathan, who's behind the scenes, for pulling us together and making the time to share your thoughts and to help us evolve on what it means to put people and culture first. And thank you everyone for joining. Please, once again, put in your thoughts, share your stories, your comments. Love to hear your feedback. And until the next time, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well done. Thank you. What a wonderful conversation, everyone. Thank you. I really enjoyed. I learned so much as well. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone has. And Marcus, a fantastic chair and skills there as well. Thank you so much for leading the conversation.